All right, force of nature. Believe it or not, the title is actually very appropriate, but is something that you won't get until you think about the episode several times. Anyways, so the classic picture here, we have the Enterprise staring down a subspace rift. Well, force of nature that it is not actually natural and, well, incredibly dangerous. At least if you're trying to use warp travel. Or at least the same kind of warp travel the feds use, because that's one of those things that gets brought up outside this episode, is that not all warp travel is the same. They use similar principles, but the exact mechanics aren't actually identical. Anyway, though, the Enterprise is actually here for the ship called the Fleming. We never actually see a picture of it because of the fact that it's never actually in visual range, which is presumably just for budget-saving purposes. The first act is basically the crew doing crew things and mostly just setting up the story, because like they talk about things like, oh, we're going to a region of space that is dangerous for this and this reasons. I'll explain those later. And they, do a variety of things related to preparing for their mission, talking about potential hazards, so on and so forth. Then, as they start the mission, they run into this Ferengi daimon who, well, is extremely unhappy because he encountered what he believed to be a Federation communications buoy, which, after he got close to it, disabled his ship with a Verteron pulse. Yeah, it wasn't actually a Federation buoy. We'll find out who made it later. The crew of the Enterprise, of course, talk to him and are like, we don't like this either. So we'll help you get on your way in exchange for telling us what you know about strange happenings in this region, because, that's what we're here for. After that, they move on and find the wreckage of a second ship and an intact version of one of those buoys, which immediately zaps their ship with a Verteron pulse and disables it in much the same way that the Ferengi ship had gotten disabled. Here's the thing. Because the fact that they flew through a wreckage cloud suggests that the Hekarans who were mining the corridor actually destroyed a ship with their insane stunts. Yeah. These are the villains in the episode, and it's the whole like terrorist with a cause archetype. As we find out here, they had given the Federation Science Council a presentation on why the Federation Science Council should ban warp travel within the Hekaras Corridor, etc., 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 and also discussing things about how they felt that their homeworld had been negatively affected by warp travel, and that they felt that their homeworld would become an uninhabitable rock if nothing was done. Now, early on, they don't actually explain in much detail why the Hekarans think their homeworld is being damaged by warp travel. Eventually, however, they get to the point where they claim that the subspace field fluctuations caused by warp travel are thinning the border between subspace and real space. And as we see when a rift forms, negatively having an impact on real space. And this is apparently the logic behind why their homeworld is in danger, is that having the border between subspace and real space thin in their home system is changing the gravitational constants in their home system, and thus caused their homeworld's orbit to shift slightly into something that's not as conducive to them living on it. Which is one of those things where, like, that's some, like, next level scientific logic here. And it's one of those things where it's an extraordinary claim that, as the saying goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and they apparently did not actually have evidence that the Federation Science Council considered to be adequate for proving their point. So they resort to other methods to get people's attention, and I would say that their efforts to get people's attention to their cause are kind of bad. Yeah, like I mentioned, the Ferengis ship needed help from the Enterprise to get fully repaired. I don't know if the Ferengi ship would have actually been able to repair their ability to leave on their own. Because, like, the ship was only partially functional when the Enterprise found them. And then we have the Fleming, which, as it turns out, the Fleming did actually manage to repair their warp drive on their own, but was unable to make contact with the USS Enterprise, and accidentally made the rift worse, and also increased the damage to their ship in the process. So the Fleming actually would have been fine if not for Serova creating a subspace rift intentionally. Yeah, that was stupid. Anyway, though, but yeah, the whole thing about Serova deciding to create a subspace rift intentionally is all of Act 4. And, the Enterprise is fortunately not inside the subspace rift when it forms. However, the subspace rift that forms engulfs the Fleming, and the Enterprise is here to save the Fleming. So the Enterprise has to figure out how to go into the rift, beam people off the Fleming, and get out of the rift before the Fleming is destroyed and all of the people on it die. Notably, I don't remember if they mentioned anything about beaming any of the cargo off the Fleming. They might have gotten some of the cargo off the Fleming, but probably not much. So yeah, that's a massive loss to the Federation. Even if all of the personnel on board the Fleming survive, ooh, the Hekarans have given them reasons to be extremely unhappy. Yeah. Anyways, so Act 5. Act 5 is really just, the Enterprise exits the rift, because I mentioned before is that the Fleming activating their warp drive caused the rift to get larger. Well, that happened after the Enterprise was already inside the rift, so the Enterprise had to recalculate a method of getting out of the rift, so on, science the tech and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so oh, and also it's like the process of surfing the wave is something so badly improvised that it's noted that it almost destroyed the ship, quite frankly. So the Enterprise needs a hefty amount of repairs. Assuming no one died on the Enterprise, you know, there's the mystery second ship whose identity is never actually explained. It is the debris of a real ship, though. It's not an illusion. It's not random bits of junk that Rabal and Serova dumped into space. That's a lot of debris. So, yeah, Rabal and Serova have killed at least the crew of one ship. Injuries on the other 3 ships, probably fatalities. I don't know of any. Definitely people who get to be in the category of villains who meant well. Not in a good way, though. Anyways, this is also something that famously has the thing of predicting that if the warp travel thing is not as a environmental impact is not changed, that the warp travel will eventually destroy subspace in all of civilized space. Yeah, this was pretty heavy-handed as an analogy for uh, uh, petroleum-based fuels destroying the environment on Earth. Yeah, this is one of those 90s stories. So it's an elaborate analogy for global warming, but applied to subspace. Oh, and also literally applied to the Hekaran homeworld because somehow the Hekaran homeworld is getting warmer as a result of these gravitational shifts. Yep. Okay. Lovely. Anyways, um, side note on this, the whole warp travel limitation thing got thrown out the window shortly after this because, as I mentioned before, not all warp drives are created equal. The form of warp travel used by the Federation in uh, TNG was apparently something that was calculated to be like the most efficient method, which apparently is the one that also causes the most damage to subspace. And other somewhat less efficient methods just don't have the subspace problem. It's actually something made as a plot point in the technical specs for the um, uh, Voyager from Star Trek Voyager, is that the reason why it has the variable geometry warp nacelles is because it has a different form of warp drive that doesn't cause the same amount of subspace turbulence when used. Yeah. So how many warp capable civilizations ever had this problem? We don't know. Oh, also the warp speed limitation is not for all of space. The warp speed limitation is actually only for regions of space that have a um, susceptibility to rifts forming. It's actually something that's a minor thing that people sometimes forget, is that it's not actually a global warp 5 limitation, even though some episodes seem to try to say it is. As it put in this episode, it wasn't. It's only for places like the Hekaras Corridor where it would be dangerous, potentially. Anyway, though, yeah. This episode, while the overall message is heavy-handed nonsense, and the aliens of the week are unambiguously malicious. It's one of those things where it's just like the whole like rebel with a cause idea, where they're trying to get attention and doing so in the worst way possible. Like Okay, the Federation Science Council told you needed more information. Well, give them more information. Anyway, so let's go through the specifics. Fleming, it's really little more than a plot point. We never actually see any of the people for it. It gets talked about, and you see the effects of it doing stuff, and it's left abandoned in the rift. Um, whether or not it was actually destroyed, I don't know. The story just leaves it behind and forgets about it, and it's implied by the fact that the Enterprise was nearly destroyed exiting the rift that the Fleming is expected to be destroyed by being in the rift, but we don't actually see it get destroyed. So, the rift itself. Rifts like this are, in fact, not natural and are, well, something you could consider a force of nature. It's manipulating nature in a bad way. And as I mentioned before, the rift forms due to a specific methodology of forcing one to be created. It's not something that actually forms as a natural result of people using warp drive. Also, one thing that the episode kind of glosses over and it gets mentioned later because like they do that carpet analogy, but the carpet analogy carries with it the implication that any harmful change to subspace is permanent and irreversible. Is that true? That's a very interesting question and something that gets uh, examined later in um, other things. Like in Discovery, they also go with the Subspace Rift thing, but in Discovery, they go with the idea that the Subspace Rift is actually repairable, and that um, while it's something you don't want to have, it's not the end of the universe for your solar system if one forms. Anyways. Oh yeah. Also, there's subspace ruptures, which are completely different because plot convenience. Yeah. They don't really go into a huge amount of detail about the difference between rifts and ruptures. Rifts are said to be where subspace is replacing real space, so that you have what should be subspace intruding into normal space. That's a rift. A rupture is apparently just like an opening in normal space that allows you to go into a subspace realm. Yeah. Okay then. Yeah. Oh yeah. Suspiria actually found a practical, safe use for subspace ruptures as a way to enter and leave subspace layers. Okay then. Oh yeah, Exosia. Not really part of this episode, but it's a thing that exists. Anyways, so Serova and Rabal. We don't actually learn much about any of them. Both of them exist to push the plot along and only actually show up for like half the episode. Um, like I mentioned before, they are basically your stereotypical terrorists with a cause who are doing things that are highly dangerous and, as far as I've been able to tell, killed the crew of an entire starship with their stupid Verderon probes. Because like the one starship apparently exploded as a result of the Verderon probe disabling it. Why exactly that happened, I have the episode doesn't explain that. It's just there. Don't know whose ship that was either. Could have been a Federation ship. Could have been a independent minor race ship that just happened to be a similar size to the Fleming. Anyway, though, yeah, these two. Good motives, bad methods. Like the Verteron probes thing is one of those things. It's like, are you insane? Are you trying to get Hekarans banned from interstellar society for the rest of time? Anyways, Hekarans as a race are actually notable only for, one, the fact that they have an exceptionally elaborate makeup for how they look. Like, seriously, like, they actually modeled tiny little tentacles to hold their hair in place. That is an interesting detail. The frilly robes that they wear, cool, I guess. But yeah, like they're not said to have any like interesting anything, no special powers, no unique technology. Well, anyway. Hekaras II. It's their homeworld. We don't know anything about it other than the fact that it's uh, in the Hekaras sector and gets uh, major climate changes due to gravitational shifts and so on and so forth. But again, one thing to remember about Hekaras is that the gravitational shifts in the Hekaras system were the reason why Serova and Rabal were going around trying to prevent people from using warp travel, is because they were concerned that if the gravitational shifts got worse, their planet would become fully uninhabitable. This was not the result of the Subspace Rift forming. The rift formed after they started doing that. Probably made it worse, but we don't actually know. The Hekaras Sector. Okay, there's an interesting thing about this that's kind of strange. One, the majority of the Hekaras Sector has unusually intense Tetryon fields, which of course forms the Hekaras Corridor. Here's the thing about this. Why? It's something that's just thrown out there as such a natural phenomenon that is largely uh, unexplained, and the story doesn't even talk about it. See, the thing with the Hekaras Corridor is that most of this region of space you can't go through with warp travel because of how intense the Tetryon fields are. So, unlike most regions of space where the space lanes would look like a cobweb, all of the space lanes go through this tiny little corridor. Because outside it, you have these Tetryon fields that prevent warp travel. Okay. No, it does not explain this. Also, the thing I mentioned about how not all methods of warp travel work the same way would suggest that maybe possibly a different method of warp travel than the Federation is using might actually be able to just go through the Tetryon fields. Again, the plot does not delve into that. It's just one of those things that's just kind of thrown out there. Also, this map shows that there are multiple star systems in the Tetryon fields. Are those actually inhabited or not? Has anyone ever gone to them to look? Because supposedly that is unpassable by warp travel. So would the Federation have any knowledge about whether those planets are inhabited or not? Dun, dun, dun. And yeah, again, this is an episode with a whole lot of things you can ponder and think about. The actual story is kind of dumb, but we don't really know the certain. There's a lot of vagaries involved with it that you could tinker with to make an interesting adventure out of this story. Or, just steal certain of the useful parts of it and make something that doesn't suck. Quite frankly, I would not actually want to have this like played uh, directly as a story, because it's kind of heavy-handed messaging, and I'm not a fan of that. But anyways, see you guys later.